Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network, with the show brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, everybody. Welcome into this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I believe is the 196th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. So thank you, as always, for listening, for participating, for sending in your questions, for leaving your comments, any of that good stuff. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal, so go to bostonsportsjournal.com and get a subscription there. You get all kinds of great stuff on all the 4 major pro sports teams, so make sure you take care of that. I also want to let you know, for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the very instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast drops on the interwebs. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is going to be a Pucks with Haggs mailbag edition. Also, I think we're just going to go over a couple of major topics here because that's what's going on with the Bruins. The Combine is going on in Buffalo right now. Some interesting developments across the scope of the league. The Bruins have talked to a lot of the prospects you would expect them to talk to. They took a few of them out for dinner. We're going to talk more about that next week as we start leading into the NHL draft. But for now, the biggest news that I don't think was official when we did the last podcast is that Marco Sturm was officially named the head coach of the Boston Bruins. This is what I expected. This is what I thought. I think this makes sense on a number of different levels. The one thing I will say that's interesting about this, he's the 30th head coach of the Bruins, 46 years old, German-born, significant player in Bruins history. I know he wasn't in the Bruins top 100. I know the numbers don't scream out like best Bruins of all time. I'm not saying that. I'm saying some of the things that he did were very significant in recent Bruins history, which makes him a significant player in Bruins history. He was a part of the Joe Thornton trade. In fact, I think he was the longest serving Bruin after the trade, and certainly I think made the biggest impact of any of the 3 players that were traded for Joe Thornton in a trade that really ended up being not great for the Bruins. You got to get first-round picks if you're going to trade a player like that, and I think since then teams have learned that lesson. But he was the most significant piece coming from San Jose to Boston in that trade. He ended up playing 5 seasons, parts of 5 seasons with the Bruins, had over 100 goals. I think he had close to 200 points, played over 300 games. So that's one. The second one was scored a significant, huge goal in recent Bruins history. He was the one that scored the game winner in Game 6 against Montreal in that 2008 first-round series that essentially brought the Bruins back from irrelevance. That brought so many fans back in, season ticket holders buying tickets, people getting back into the fold. The last 15 or so years of Bruins, the golden era of Bruins, the last 15 years, was ushered in by Marco Sturm scoring a game-winning goal against the Montreal Canadiens in a Game 6 that they won. They ended up losing in Montreal in Game 7. But that first-round series and pushing it to 7 games, that exciting, just awesome game, if you watched it in person, Game 6 at the Garden against the Montreal Canadiens, back and forth, fights, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. That brought Bruins fans back, and it brought interest and relevancy back for the Boston Bruins in a big way. That was the game where Jack Edwards famously said, "This building is vibrating," after Marco Sturm scored, because the Garden was just going ballistic at that point, going crazy. So that you could argue that is one of the top 5 most important goals of the last 2 decades for the Boston Bruins that anybody has scored. I would put it up there in that level. So he has that, and he also had the game-winning goal in the first Winter Classic at Fenway Park against the Flyers in overtime. Also a big goal, historically speaking, for the Boston Bruins. Good, fast German forward when he was here. Had some good offensive years. When he first got here, was actually one of Patrice Bergeron's first line mates when Bergeron finally moved to center. In his second full season, I think it was, after coming out of the lockout, or third full season maybe coming out of the lockout. It was Brad Boyes, Patrice Bergeron, and Marco Sturm. They were a big line for the Bruins when they were together for that short period of time. So he not a nobody, a guy that was a useful player, a guy that scored some big goals, had some huge moments for the Bruins, very popular teammate, a passionate guy, loved hockey. You could see the passion on his face and the expressions that he made when he was on the ice celebrating or anything else. So as a player, he's memorable for all of those things. Now, because of that, people want to say he was an in-house hire or nepotism, or like they didn't obviously search very hard if they came up with one of their own players as the coach. That's bullcrap. I mean, that is just like a very easy, lazy thing to say that's not even true. Marco Sturm has not been a part of the Bruins organization for 15 years. Marco Sturm went and coached the German national team to an Olympic silver medal. And when he wanted to get involved with coaching, then he found a job in the LA Kings organization, not the Boston Bruins organization. Went there, was an assistant to Todd McClellan for 4 years, and then spent the last 3 years guiding the LA Kings AHL team to 3 straight playoff appearances. By all accounts, a very solid, structurally sound defensive coach, a guy that stresses defense, playing two ways, playing a sound brand of hockey defensively, while also, trying to be innovative offensively like all hockey coaches are. And he was obviously a forward and an offensive player when he was in the league. So, there's going to be that element to his game. The one thing I will say, when you look at the numbers of the teams that he played, and some of that I'm sure has to do with personnel as well, especially at the AHL level, but his power plays were not what I would call explosive or dangerous. And that's something that I think you may have to bring somebody in, some kind of an assistant coach or somebody to take care of that particular unit, which struggled last year as well. And they have the personnel, obviously, to have an explosive power play and to have a really effective one based on the players that they have. Certainly centering something around David Pastrnak, one of the best offensive players in the game, should automatically put you in dangerous territory as far as the power play goes. So, but I think the bottom line is they wanted a few different things with the head coach coming in. They wanted somebody that was going to get them back to a defensive structure that was going to make sense. They've talked about switching from zone defense in the D zone to man-to-man, some kind of hybrid man-to-man defense in the D zone. So maybe a box and one or something like that, but some kind of hybrid defensive style of man-to-man in the defensive zone. Traditionally, they have not done that in the past. And I think it also means they're going to try to gum up the neutral zone. They do the 1-3-1 with the Kings. That's something they've done a lot of, and bogs down the game, clogs things up in the neutral zone. Like that may be something that comes to Boston. And personnel-wise, it probably makes sense if they don't have the most explosive offensive players to play a little bit more that way. It's not going to be the most exciting style in the world, but I think what you're seeing now is that that's a trend or a way the Bruins want to go based on who they have and what they have for personnel. Jim Montgomery wasn't a good fit because he wanted to play, hold on to the puck, create plays, take risks offensively, have super aggressive defense that were pinching all the time and playing really deep in the zone and doing all that stuff. That's not going to work when you don't have a good enough offensive personnel and when you have defense that are making mistakes and you have goalies that are letting in some soft goals. Like once that starts happening, and especially when you don't have the personnel to really crank out the offense and to actually make plays when you're hanging on to the puck, like Jim Montgomery was preaching these guys to do, it's not going to work. And that was a big reason why I think it wasn't going to work with him based on the personnel that was changing. And I think bringing in somebody like Sturm, who has more of a defensive background and is really good, I think, and has proven that in the AHL at developing young players, communicating with them, working with them. comfortable working with the younger generation of guys and getting the best out of them. That's also something you're going to need out of a coach that's coming into this situation, because there's going to be young guys coming up and being looked at to contribute. So, I think he fits the bill, Marco Sturm, on all of the stuff, the qualities that they were looking for based on the personnel, based on the roster, based on the direction of the organization, based on a sort of gradual retool over the next couple of years, where they probably hope to get back into the playoffs next year. Probably not going to be a Stanley Cup contender, a legit one, but able to get back in the playoffs based on the core group that they have and making some good decisions. But really the retool, I think they look at as by the end of year 2, they should really start to be looking like a team that is going to be tough to deal with, a team that could be a contender, a team that's going to, build something and have something special while still utilizing, prime years for guys like Pasternak and McAvoy and Swayman. So, I think all of that stuff says to me he was the right choice based on that. And then you add the layer of, when he was playing here, Cam Neely and Don Sweeney were both in the organization and in the front office. They were a part of it. And Charlie Jacobs was significant figure here as well when Marco Sturm was here before. You're talking about guys like Adam McQuaid, who's in player development, who played with Marco Sturm. Guys like Patrice Bergeron that are around the team. Andrew Raycroft, who works for Nesson and does color commentary. He was a teammate of Marco Sturm's. You have different guys like this that are coming in, and Zdeno Chara, a teammate of Marco Sturm's, and he's somebody that's in the Bruins front office now. So you have some really strong connections based on past experience where there's a trust factor with Marco Sturm. And I think there's going to be a collaborative communication going on back and forth between the player, between coach and between front office. That's going to be, really functional rather than dysfunctional or rather than adversarial or anything like that. I think you're going to have everybody on the same page, which I think you're absolutely going to need over the next couple of years while you're building something back up and really retooling. The bottom line with Marco Sturm is I think he's a fine hire. I think he's earned it based on his experience. He's got past head coaching experience in the AHL and the Olympics, an NHL assistant for 4 years. He's had success. He's done well in other organizations. He's bringing outside knowledge into the Bruins way of doing things. He's perfect for the job, appropriate for the job. He has earned the job. Okay. All of that stuff. Like, I don't want to hear that this was an inside hire or any of that kind of stuff. Like, he was a very appropriate hire for this team based on what he's done, and it was on merit. But I also think it's going to base a lot of what's going to happen with Marco Sturm and how it's going to go for him. It's not going to be about his coaching experience and his ability to coach. Like, I think that's proven. It's going to be about the personnel, and it's going to be about what the Bruins do this summer as far as free agency and trades go, and bringing in more talent, bringing in more offensive players, bringing in depth, setting something up where you're going to have two goalies challenging each other, where Swayman's going to get pushed a little bit by Korpisalo, and having good health, obviously, from their defenseman core. But it's going to come down to the roster and the talent of the roster as to how quickly things are going to retool and how well this is going to go for Marco Sturm. He's not going to be able to coach the roster that's currently in place back into the playoffs. The Bruins front office has some significant jobs and work to do, drafting a great player with the number 7 overall pick with a bright future, bringing in players in free agency, using their cap space wisely, making a smart trade or two, using their creativity and their energy to bring in some good players. Like, that's what's going to be important. And that's where you're going to see Marco Sturm either sink or swim or fail or succeed. Like, if the players aren't there and the roster isn't good enough, it's not going to matter how good of a coach Marco Sturm is. It's going to be tough. But I think he's a hungry guy that understands pride of the Bruins, understands the expectations, understands the terrain here, like gets it in a way that Jim Montgomery, in my opinion, just did not and could not, because he wasn't from here, didn't play here, didn't understand the way certain things work and the expectations are and all that stuff. And sometimes that can be a good thing. I'm not sure it was a great thing with Jim Montgomery, and I think in the end it was somewhat problematic. And I also think like there's a lot of good hockey coaches out there. Marco Sturm is one of them. I think he's earned this opportunity, and I'm excited and interested to see how he's going to do. And just knowing how good of a person he is and how much he cares and how passionate he's about the game, I think that's going to translate with the players. And I think it's going to really bring a different level of emotion to this team and the way they do things. And I think that's a good thing. So I'm excited for the Marco Sturm era to begin. And I think it was absolutely the right choice for the Boston Bruins. No question about it. All right. Moving on. Brad Marchand scores the overtime game winner in game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals, double overtime, in fact, for the Florida Panthers to tie things up in the series against the Edmonton Oilers. A great game by Marchand. He had scoring chances in the other overtime. Had chances to end it. In Florida, it was back and forth, great game. And then Marchand finally ends it, flying the zone a little bit, getting a great pass and doing that little, push backhand finish through the 5-hole. We've seen that before. But it's, probably mixed feelings for Bruins fans. I think a lot of people are watching the Panthers and watching because Marchand is in the series and are still rooting for him. Playing for somebody else. Others, I'm sure, are have a hard time rooting for the Panthers, rooting for anybody in that uniform. Maybe they even feel like Marchand, did them wrong in some way by wanting to go to Florida and the Bruins, doing the right thing, sending him to the place he wanted to go. But I think as we've seen it's been a perfect fit for him. And frankly, if the Panthers win the series and he has a good Stanley Cup Final, he is going to be in the running for the Conn Smythe. And wouldn't that be amazing if Brad Marchand ends up winning the Conn Smythe for the Florida Panthers when they win the Cup, if they win the Cup? He's second in points, second in goals, second in plus minus. He's averaging 16 plus minutes a game. He and Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen have been phenomenal as a third line. That's really trumped other teams' third lines. And frankly, the minutes they're getting, 16, 17 minutes a night, they're basically playing like a top 6 role anyway. When you look at the production and you look at the minutes that they're out there. So been extremely, extremely important, great piece for the Panthers. And frankly, I think if they win, the Panthers win back-to-back, it's because they added players like Seth Jones and Brad Marchand to the mix that they already had. Nate Schmidt's another one. Great pieces that got added. So Bill Zito, hats off to him. Outstanding GM work. But we've also got some interesting things that Brad Marchand had to say in interviews during the Stanley Cup Final week, in the interview process, the interviews that the players give in the days hyping up the series. He also did a sit down with Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada that was very interesting. It was on Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast, sort of looking back to his time and the end in Boston, and then also looking forward to free agency and what's going to happen after July 1. So I'm going to get to that Marchand sound in a second, but I also want to give a little love to our sponsors first. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite hockey players with players from basketball, baseball, esports, and so much more. Here's some picks for this week. Connor McDavid, more than 1.5 points. Aaron Ekblad, more than 3.5 hits. Sergei Bobrovsky, more than 25.5 saves. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks. They also offer Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, and for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channels, as well. And please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right. So Marchand, been excellent for the Panthers throughout these playoffs, has had fun moments with Dairy Queen where he's talking about eating blizzards between periods. His mom goes nuts and says, "Way to go, Bradley." And the video catches her. The cameras catch her after the Game 2 double overtime game winner. We love Marchand's parents and Marchand's family. They're fun people. So like he's everybody else in Florida certainly is getting a taste of what it's like to watch Brad Marchand on a playoff run. We're talking about now a guy that's got the most Stanley Cup Final goals of any active player in the NHL. We're talking about a guy that's played in a ton of Game 7s, played in a lot of Stanley Cup Finals. Like this is, the Hall of Fame player that we're seeing right now doing his thing for a different team and making a huge impact there. So it was interesting. He was asked this week a little bit about the end in Boston and reflecting on it now. And here's what he had to say. It was stressful in a lot of senses. Some of them were situational. I wasn't in before. I wouldn't say I dealt with them great. The business side of it. I let it frustrate me. And then obviously our team wasn't having success as we expected. We were having a hard time getting back on track. And eventually we did. We thought we were climbing back into playoff position and we just fell apart. There were different hurdles that continued to get frustrating and stressful throughout the year, but that's part of the game and you've got to find ways to deal with it. I wish I had done a better job at times, but it's something I can learn from. I give Marchand a lot of credit for admitting this. Like, probably tough to be a captain in on a team that's struggling like they were, on a team where the coach got fired after 20 games, where you don't know what's happening with your own situation beyond that season. You're a lame duck captain who doesn't have a contract. You feel like you're being lowballed. And, you hear reports at one point during the year, there were reports that Elliot Friedman said that the Bruins were close with Marchand on a contract. And obviously he didn't feel like they were close. And he, said that those were false after a game. Clearly wasn't happy about that. But trying to be a leader, trying to do all the things he can do while having uncertainty with the contract for really the first time in his career where he wasn't sure what was going to happen, then hearing his name in trade rumors at certain points. Like, all of that's got to be difficult and not something you can train for. Like, that's something you just have to experience, go through and figure out how to get through it on the other side. And it tells me that, that was just a difficult situation the Bruins were in last year. Going into a year like we talked about before, where the head coach was a lame duck, the captain was a lame duck, the goalie was a holdout for the entire training camp. Like, a disastrous setup to the season when you look back on it now. Like, how would it not be? How could it not be that way? Two of your most important leaders and figures leading the team were both not given any guarantees what was going to happen to them beyond the year. So once they struggled and really fell out of it early in the year and, had a bad training camp too, that's a cocktail for disaster. I kick myself for not seeing that happening more clearly before it happened, because all the ingredients were there for it to be just bad right out of the gate, right out of the chute, and be bad all year. And as soon as things started turning bad, you saw that there was going to be problems based on, key figures that didn't have any certainty whatsoever as to whether they're going to be there long term. So they start worrying about their own situation. That's just natural. So, I think it's interesting hearing and seeing all that. And I think that's, I credit the Bruins for learning from it as well and extending Don Sweeney rather than allowing him to go into a lame duck situation as well. So, I think they understand now that last year was not executed as well as it could have been, just from a management perspective, from an organizational perspective, allowing those situations to happen. You learn from that and you're like, all right, we should never do that again. That was bad. That was not didn't put us in a great position to succeed and to win. And I credit Marchand for having the self-awareness upon reflecting to realize that there are things he didn't handle the right way as a captain. There were things he didn't handle the right way as a guy that with an uncertain future. There's times where he probably could have done things a little better or a little different. And now he knows that moving forward. And I think that's a big admission by him. But I think it's par for the course. I think Brad Marchand's always been an accountable guy. He's a guy that's willing to accept and admit his mistakes and learn from them and move on. And I think that's a credit to who he is as a person, that he's always been that way. But I thought that was interesting. He said that in the press conferences immediately before the Stanley Cup Final when they put them in front of the podium. Another really interesting Brad Marchand nugget. He sat down with Elliot Friedman. It was about a 10-minute interview that they had on the 32 Thoughts podcast. I think it was from June 5th, maybe. Go back and check. But it was a 10-minute interview. He answered a few questions. I'm sure it was for TV, but they also recorded it and put it on the podcast, the whole entire interview, which I thought was good. And one of the questions that Elliot Friedman asked Brad Marchand was, if he needed a change with the leaving the Bruins and going to Florida, if that was like necessary, if that was something he needed to spark him, or if that was like the best thing for him. And his answer was interesting. He said, I have a family and we've built a life in Boston. We absolutely love it there. We will live there down the road. So he was a little conflicted at first, saying like, Boston's our home. We love it. I didn't want to leave. And we're going to settle there once my playing career is over. For hockey-wise, absolutely, yeah. At this point, when I look at where I am and where I would have been if I didn't get moved, at the end of the day, I'm a competitive person, and there are things I wouldn't have been able to do if I stayed in Boston and retired and everything. I'm in a position to play for a cup, and at the end of the day, that's why I play this game. I'm going to stop that and interject here. This is like exactly why he wanted to get moved to the Florida Panthers. When he realized the contract was not going to happen with Boston, he let it be known that he wanted to go to Florida. That's where he wanted to get traded. And I think there's a number of reasons. I think he likes their style of play. He thought they had a legit chance at the Cup. I think also the fact that Sean Thornton and Gregory Campbell are down there, former teammates, I think also helped quite a bit as far as feeling comfortable going to that organization and feeling like there was some trust there. But I think this is also an admission on his part that he knew the Bruins were not going in the right direction. He knew they were not going to be playing for a cup for the next couple of years. And that if he was going to stay there, he was staying there to lead a team that was not going to be as competitive. It was not going to have legit cup aspirations and chances. And that was going to be hard for a guy that's 36, 37 and wants to win as competitive. So I do think the Bruins made the right decision in the end, trading him somewhere where he could be him and be more effective and be in the position that he wants to be in, rather than expecting him to be a good leader on a team that's going nowhere or is not going nowhere, but is like slowly building back up and doesn't have real legit cup chances for at least a year or two. Like maybe they would have had legit cup chances by the very end of Marchand's contract if he'd signed a 3-year deal to stay on in Boston. But I think this is him basically saying, like, they did me a solid. This is where, I'm in a great position now, and it would have been a much different thing if I'd stayed with the Bruins. And he, still seems to maintain that he wanted to stay in Boston here. But I think this also sheds some interesting light on his decisions after July 1, where he thinks he's going to go, what he's going to do in free agency, where he's going to sign. I suspect the door's already closed with the Bruins, and this kind of confirms it, where he's looking at them and saying, I'm in a position to play for a cup, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had stayed in Boston and retired there. He seems to think it's going to be at least a few years before they're back at it. So I would say that rules them out from him coming back above and beyond imagining that both he and Don Sweeney, after thinking about it for a few days after the sort of parting of the ways in the trade, probably decided or thought, yeah, that's not going to happen. Now, he does mention that his family has built a life in Boston, and that's a consideration, obviously. And it'll be interesting to see if he signs somewhere, if it's like Zdeno Chara, where the last few years he played away from his family and his family stayed in Boston, and he would see them occasionally, but he was kind of living on his own playing, and they were doing their thing back in Boston, going to school, working, etc. It'll be interesting to see if that's the same thing that happens with Marchand, if it's a situation like that as well, with his kids like really settled in Boston and happy here. and how much of a consideration that is. But like, he's only going to be playing 2-3 more years anyway. So I think that's something that could be doable. I'm not sure they're going to look to uproot everything. And maybe that's a consideration in some way, shape, or form. Or maybe that keeps Marchand closer on the East Coast somewhere where it's easy to get back to Boston. But I just thought all that was interesting. And I think it shed some light on his thoughts on what he pictured the Bruins as for the next couple of years, how he envisioned himself as a leader on that team and what his responsibilities were going to be, and like what he's looking for in free agency and what he's not looking for and how he views the Bruins. And I think I would say it's effectively a shut door that he was going to come back to Boston based on these comments and based on knowing him anyway. I just think it's, and the Bruins, I think it's mutual. I think they want to move forward with Pasternak, Morgan Geekie, Hampus Lindholm, Jeremy Swayman, potentially Charlie McAvoy, like all of those guys being the leaders of that team, instead of bringing back Marchand, who cast a big shadow, and not allowing some of these other younger players to take really ownership of the team and be the leaders that they want to be and sort of grow into those roles. So I think it's kind of mutual to a degree. And I think that's what the Bruins sort of decided when they traded all those veterans at the deadline. But here's the rest of what Marchand had to say. I believe wholeheartedly that everything happens for a reason, that I was meant to be in Florida, and everything that happened this year was meant to test me, to make me better, and to make me learn to appreciate the opportunity right now and be grateful for it. I can't say whether the trade was the best thing for me, but I know I'm grateful to be here in Florida, and I know I loved every moment that I was in Boston. I was nervous as anything to move and to not really know what was expected or what was coming, but I've loved every moment that I've been here too, so it was easy. It was a win-win. And that's really what it comes down to. I think, Marchand didn't know how the other side lived. He didn't know how it was going to be playing for another team. All he'd ever known was being a part of the Boston Bruins, and he was entirely happy with that and satisfied with that and wanted to, finish his career there just like Patrice Bergeron did, his buddy, his line mate. That did not happen for Brad Marchand, but I think he's also very much understanding that he had something special in Boston. He's got traded to another special opportunity where he's got some really special things that could happen for him. Some great opportunities to win another cup and to be part of a great team that are presenting themselves to him now later in his career where he can really appreciate it. So, I think it's just, it is a win-win for him. And, to a degree, it's a win for Bruins fans that get to root for him and are happy for him, seeing him do certain things in these playoffs and get game winners in Stanley Cup Final, double overtime game winners, and play as well as he has. And curiosity, it'll be interesting to see where he goes in free agency. Though he did not rule out going to Canada. He certainly didn't rule out the Toronto Maple Leafs, although it's hard for me to believe he would go there based on the battles he's had with the Toronto media in the past. But it'll be really interesting to see where he goes. The thing about him, he gets all the TNT love. He gets all the, in-game interviews. He gets all kinds of, he's one of the, if not one of the most charismatic, if not the most charismatic personalities in the game right now. He's got so much going on and so many things that he's doing well that, and so much that he helps sell tickets while still being in the prime of his career and still being able to play at the level that he does, where he's going to be an asset to any team that he goes to. And he's going to be one of those players that sells your team, that makes it more interesting, that day in and day out adds value to your organization. So he's going to get a great contract. He's going to get a ton of teams looking at him. And I think the Bruins are going to, at times realize what they don't have anymore. Once you lose a player like that is that charismatic, that is that likable, that has that kind of personality, that is that nationally known as a face of the league, that gets all the TV time that he does, clearly has a TV career waiting for him after he's done playing, doing whatever he wants to do. And he's a Hall of Fame caliber level player. You can't replace those players. That is taking a heart and soul kind of thing and trading it away. You don't easily replace that. It's going to take a long time. And this is part of the Bruins' plight, is knowing that they are down a couple of really game-breaking impactful, like scoring wingers that they need to figure out where they're going to get them from and how they're going to get them and replace them. And Jake DeBrusk and Brad Marchand in the last couple of years that have left the folds. And, obviously Morgan Geekie morphed in or developed into a 30-goal scorer this past year, and I think is a really good player and is going to be an asset for the Bruins. And that Lindholm, Geekie, Pasternak line looks like it's going to be something moving forward. But they need more NHL wingers, top six, that can score, put the puck in the net. And that's something that is underscored by watching Marchand do what he's done for the Florida Panthers. All right. That's what I got for today. Great Marchand talk. Great talk about Marco Sturm. Awesome Stanley Cup Final series going on right now with the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. If you've not watched the first two games, they've both gone to overtime, back and forth games, really nail-biting, incredibly well played at both ends. Star players playing awesome, goalies playing great. Do yourself a favor and watch that series if you're not. And if you're a Bruins fan, try not to feel too bad about watching Brad Marchand do his thing for somebody else, because it is pretty good to see him in the prime of his career still, even as a third liner, like just – in the last few months, how he's gone from a new piece there, feeling out his way, to all of a sudden now a leader, one of the prime scorers, one of the big pieces on that Florida Panthers team has been amazing to watch, but it's a tribute to how good he is as a player. All right, especially in the playoffs. Let's thank all of our friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right. Thank you, everybody else out there for listening to this Pucks with Haggs podcast. We'll see you at the ring.